How's it going, guys? My name is Tavarish, and today I'm going to be doing something that I should have done from the very beginning on my Fast and Furious Lamborghini, and that is a full maintenance tune-up. And we're going to save thousands of dollars in the process. I am going to be going over every single thing that I'm doing so you guys can follow along at home and do it on your cars. You don't have to have a Lamborghini to do it, but you do need to do it because if you don't, that happens. So if you guys are new to the channel, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoy it. This car is almost ready to go to paint, which means it's almost ready to be done. And that's how I do things. This, of course, is my 2003 Lamborghini Murcielago. It was screen used in the Fate of the Furious, and it needs a little bit of love, a lot of love. So in the last episode, you saw that it had a little bit of a coolant leak when I did the rev battle. It's okay. And then I found out what that coolant leak was because I pulled out this coolant hose, and this coolant hose was split pretty good. But the reason why is not because I did the rev battle or anything like that. This coolant hose split because it was just old. This car, even though it only has 14,000 miles on it, this car is 16 years old. So I need to make sure that all these hoses are in really good condition, and the ones that are very inaccessible, I need to change them right away. Now, there actually aren't any more hoses that I can't get to, so this is the only one. This is the trouble hose. So I got a length of heater hose, which is rated for coolant. You definitely want to get one of these, and I'm going to install it here. It's very, very hard to put a camera down here, and you can't really see anything. I need to actually use the flashlight, and there's no space for a camera. So we're just going to take this as a given, and we're going to go on to some other things. But this might take me a little while to do. Come on, you piece of... Ah! All right, the hose is done, and it wasn't actually that hard. So the next thing we have to do is the actual maintenance tune-up part of the job. And the first thing I'm going to do is this air filter. Now, in the previous video, I showed you how this air filter was the subject of a mouse invasion. There was definitely a mouse living somewhere in the airbox, and all his mouse droppings went all over the air filter when the engine turned on. So this is actually a K&N air filter, and I can actually clean it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all this junk out, and we're going to clean it. And since this is a K&N, it has a special oil that I need to apply here, and I have to wait till the oil dries, and then we can start the engine. But before I do anything with this, there's also another air filter on the other side, so I'm going to take that apart, and hopefully it's not as bad as this one. All right, so the air filters are out of the car, and they do not look good. Let me just show you. Ooh. All right. That, okay. Yeah, I would say that this is not great for the engine breathing. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to put a mask on. Then I'm going to clean these filters because they are reusable. Since these are K&N filters, I'm going to use this K&N Power Clean, which is just a degreaser on these cotton filters, and then I'm going to use this air filter oil. So I just have to put the degreaser here after I clean all this crap off. I'm just going to use some air pressure, and hopefully some of this comes off and doesn't contaminate too. Wow, that's a lot. All right, that's coming off pretty good. Then I'm going to saturate the entire filter with this for about 5 minutes, then run it through some water, then do it again a few times because this is actually really bad. And then I'm going to re-oil it, and then it's going to dry, and then I can put it back in the car. All right, now that we have these filters oiled up and cleaned, I'm gonna put them to the side because they still are a little bit oily. Now, this does cause a little bit of controversy in the car world. You see, if you don't do it correctly, you could end up messing something up in your car. A lot of cars have something called a mass airflow sensor, which use a little exposed wire to measure the volume of air going past it. And when you have an oiled air filter and it's over-oiled, like this thing is just dripping with oil, then it gets onto that element and it can mess it up. Now, this car does not have a mass airflow sensor. It actually works on something called a MAP sensor, which is a pressure sensor, so it measures air a little bit differently. So these could be as oiled as I want, and it doesn't really matter. It would just choke up a little bit. So I'm gonna put these to the side. They have to be very dry to go back into the car to run again. But right now, I wanna concentrate on something that's a little bit easier to do. I don't have to refurbish anything. I just replace the new parts, and those are the spark plugs. So spark plugs are really integral. They play a really important role in an internal combustion engine with gasoline because they provide the catalyst for the power stroke. The suck, squeeze, bang, blow, they're responsible for the initial bang. And in this car, it calls for some cheap Champion spark plugs, and I thought I'd do a little bit of an upgrade. I got these NGK Iridiums, and they are DCPR 9EIX, or 2316 if you just want to type that into Amazon. These don't provide any performance benefit at all. And the reason why is because spark plugs are basically like an HDMI cable. They're either on or off. They either provide a spark or they don't. And the reason why I got iridiums versus some coppers or even platinums is because iridiums just last a little longer and it's going to be longer between changes. But before I get these spark plugs in, I have to do something called gapping them. And a lot of people think that these spark plugs come pre-gapped. Well, they don't, especially not for Lamborghinis. So the Lamborghini gap is 0.6 millimeters, which equates to 0.023 inches. And what I do, well, you know what? I'll show you what it's like to gap one spark plug. It's really exciting. Now that these are all gapped and ready to go, I'm ready to put them in the car. So let's install these bougies. All right, we are done. I did do a little bit of work off camera, but that's okay. So I can show you everything I did. This is the brand new, well, it's not really brand new, but it is a newly spark plug installed engine. And everything here is sort of kind of clean, and it's waiting for its oil change and also to get some more coolant in there. But the reason why it took a little bit longer than expected, and also the reason why I'm wearing a different shirt, is because the coil packs gave me a little bit of issue. When I pulled one out, the boot stuck in there, and that was pretty much a nightmare to take out. I had to get some really long needle nose pliers, and then they came out. And then the spark plugs themselves weren't any better. These plugs right here, yeah, I think these are probably the original plugs. These are the Champion, I believe it's 59 pp. Yeah, these weren't looking too hot. The gap was a little too big, and as you can see, there's a lot of oil residue. I don't know what that's from, but these weren't looking very good. So all spark plugs are brand new in the engine right now. All right, so now that we're under the car, we can get to the meat of the tune-up, and that is the oil change. Now this is a little bit different than your garden variety Civic or Corolla. This is what's called a dry sump system, meaning that this is not a sump for where the oil sits. The oil actually sits in a oil tank somewhere up there. I can't really show you because I can't really see it. So the bottom of this engine doesn't really have a ton of oil in it, but we do have to take off this oil sump, actually two oil sump drain plugs, one right here and one right here, and then we have to take off the drain plug for the oil tank itself. So theoretically, when we drain the engine and the oil tank, we should get around 12 quarts. Now, I don't know how much engine oil is left in this engine, but hopefully it's enough to do rev battles that I definitely should have been doing.
Uh-oh, fire extinguisher.
All right, so now we come to the most familiar portion of what the oil change is. This is actually taking off the drain bolt for the oil tank, or in a regular car, this would just be on the bottom of the engine. Now this is in a little bit of a weird spot. This is right above the arm for the two-post lift. So my lift is gonna get a little dirty. I do have a pan right underneath it, so it's gonna catch all the oil. So this bolt right here, you can't put a ton of torque on it because there is a tube leading to the oil tank, and that tube can bend. So I need to make sure that I don't over torque it and I don't give it too much initial force. So I'm gonna get another wrench, and then I'm just gonna give it a twist. And it would help if I turned it the right way. Now that we have it the right way, I can give it a little twist. And come on. There we go. All right, woo. That's great, we didn't break anything. I really hope so. Okay, we're good, we're good, we're good. Nobody panic. Okay, that's oil. Woo! So, the good news is the oil does not look too bad, actually. The oil looks in decent shape. It's not too black, but it is coming out at an alarming rate, and it is making quite a large mess. Okay, I'm gonna get some rags. Oh, okay, now it's slowing down. Only minor casualties. I call that a win. So the last thing that I'm gonna do while I'm down here is change the oil filter. This oil filter looks pretty bad. Should oil filters have rust on it? I think this should be a firmly grasp it type situation. And oh, that actually came off pretty nice. Okay, I was gonna make a joke about that, but that worked out pretty well. This is an OEM style filter that is about to get OEM all over my hand. Okay, there we go. So that was full of oil. What you need to do is make sure that you don't leave the gasket on there like this just did. Gasket comes off with the filter. You clean all this off, you clean off the threads, and then you put a brand new filter on here, but I'm not gonna put just this filter. Since I am putting it up basically upside down or upwards, I am going to pre-fill this with some brand new engine oil, and then I'm going to put a nice little, actually I could do that right now. I'll just lube this gasket with a little bit of engine oil, then just put it hand tight because I want this to come off as easy as this came off. All right, now the car is on the ground and it's ready to have its oil changed. Now I did a few things underneath. I did torque everything to spec, and I did replace the crush washers. That's very important. You definitely want to do that on a car this high strung, and you definitely don't want any oil leaks. Now the oil that I'm using, it can be contested, but I'm using a 5W40, which is what this engine calls for, and I'm using a synthetic liquid moly. And a lot of people use Motul. I use Motul for my other Lamborghini, but liquid moly seems to be good, and it's also pretty economical. I'm not going to say cheap, it's not a cheap oil, but it does have everything that this car calls for as far as requirements, so it should be good enough. Now, the procedure is really easy, and it's actually easier than what normal dry sump engines would call for. You actually have to put 4 quarts in the engine and then 8 quarts in the oil tank, and then you should be good to go for this thing to start. I don't think I'm going to start it because I do need to take off more panels because this car is going to go out for paint. But this car, at least I'm going to know that this has fresh oil, fresh spark plugs, and we have to put in the coolant. So it's going to have fresh coolant as well. All right. Okay. This shouldn't take long at all. All right, we are almost done. The only thing we have to do now is put in the coolant, and that is what the whole point of the day was. Hopefully this does not leak anymore, and hopefully this does not overheat and pop a hose and embarrass me in front of all my friends. But we can't just put in the coolant, we have to make sure that there's no air bubbles in the system. This system is actually quite simple. It goes from this coolant tank from here to the engine goes to here, splits off 2 ways into a Y, and then it goes into each radiator. The radiators are actually in the back of the car, which is kind of interesting and also weird. But in order for the radiators not to get air bubbles in them, we have to use this 13mm. We have to disconnect the breather on each side, just a little bit, just a crack, and then we have to fill the reservoir so the breathers have a little bit weeping out of them, a little bit of coolant coming out. That's how we know that all the air bubbles have come out, and then we can start the car. So the coolant that I'm using is actually something I got off the shelf at my local auto parts store. This is Peak Original Equipment Technology for European vehicles, and it is the same hue that I need, the same color, and it will do everything that I need this car to do. So this should do the job, and we're just going to put it in here. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice I am using the same funnel. I did clean it, so yeah, it should be okay. Doesn't even smell like oil. Make a slight incision with your thumb. It's 50-50, so you don't have to pre-mix or anything. It's already diluted. A lot of you have told me that doing this sideways eliminates the glug glug. So every time you work with coolant, make sure not to spill it on the ground because animals can come and drink it because animals are so smart. Yeah, apparently it's very sweet for them, and it's also poison, so don't do that. These are now weeping. They're weeping. I gotta stop them weeping. Yeah. Now we just close them up, and all I have to do is find my 13 mil. All right, so we have everything bled, and it's time to start it. Now, the car is gonna smoke a little bit because someone who shall remain nameless got a bunch of coolant all over the exhaust manifolds and rest of the engine, and also under the engine, and also everywhere else. But that's not important right now. So we're gonna put the battery to the on position, and let's start it up. Might be a little bit loud, and it also would help if I had the keys. Okay, got the keys. And here goes nothing. Okay, nothing has exploded so far. There's nothing leaking underneath, and it actually sounds a little bit smoother. Now there's a little bit of smoke coming from here. I just have to check what it is. It's just all the coolant coming off. And this is going up and down in idle because these throttle bodies are trying to sync themselves up, but it doesn't seem like we have any leaks. Wow, that looks like a proper fire. We don't have the air filters on, but I'm just gonna rev it just a little bit just to see if it's smooth enough. All right, I think that's good enough. This is all sort of normal. Let's just call that good. All right, that is it. This has now a new lease on life, and it's ready for more rev battles. In all seriousness, this is now ready to go on for many, many more miles. And here's how much money we saved. So I did a little bit of research, and to do this at a Lamborghini dealer, if you just brought your car over there and they did it on their time and your dime, it would cost, I hope you're sitting down, around $3,000 to do what we just did. And I don't see why. I mean, this was about a day worth of work. I split it up into 2 days. You can see I'm wearing a different shirt. You should buy this shirt, by the way. It's on my Teespring, and every dollar from profit goes directly to charity. What we did was definitely doable over a weekend, and on this car, it's really easy. I spent about $200 in materials. That includes spark plugs, that includes oil. This does take 12 quarts of oil. It has a really big cooling system. I think I got 3 gallons of coolant. I didn't end up using all of it, but I got it anyway, just in case we need to top up as necessary. But about $200 for a $2,800 savings, that's not too bad. And you guys can do the same thing on your cars. They don't have to be Lamborghinis, and they're probably going to be a lot cheaper. You can do oil changes for around 20 to 30 bucks on your own with the really good stuff. So that's going to be it. Until next time, this is me reminding you guys that on cars like this that now are taken apart, but they have the heart of a champion, for lack of a better term, because I can't think of anything else and I'm kind of tired. You guys need to wrench every day.